I have a series of questions to ask, but I think I'd like to start with asking you what is self-criticism and feeling unworthy all about? Is that a learned behavior?
Yes, it is learned. You weren't born with it. You learned it from those around you who wanted to feel good but didn't, and held you as their object of attention while they didn't feel good. So then you took personally the response you were getting from them as if there was something wrong with your behavior that evoked that. And then you just kept forking off in response to that.
Well, I don't understand why I can't drop that. With what I know now.
Well, you can.
I'm sure I can, but I don't.
Well, the reason that most don't is because it is a series of incremental efforts. And we think that the thing that has mixed most of you up about quantifying your journey is that when you're feeling unworthy and you want to feel appreciated, there's a huge vibrational variance between that. And when you try to make the jump, you fall in the ditch, you see. Where if you could move incrementally into increasingly better feeling statements, then suddenly you would realize that you are feeling better. You will have just bridged yourself into a different vibration.
It's more forking, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's working your way out of it.
It is.
Yeah.
Just and not asking it to be one giant leap over, but just this feels better and this feels better and this feels better and this feels better. So therapists have discovered that if they can get you to shift your negative attention from yourself to someone else, that you receive some temporary improvement. And we agree with that, but then you've got to shift it from negative attention to them into something else. We don't want you to end up to go from Phoenix to Yuma, only back to Phoenix to Yuma, only back to Phoenix to Yuma. In other words, it's nice when you're able to continue along the emotional scale. Want to talk about specifics?
Not really. I'd like to ask some other questions, if I may.
Okay. We think that the answer that you were looking for to that first question happened before you even got in the chair. In other words, that's what we've been talking about all morning here. And we can foresee that wonderful vibrational movement is going to happen for all of you now that you have this picture in your mind. Now that you realize, right now, I can choose something. And we want to emphasize, choose a small fork. Don't try to get all the way there. In other words, just choose something that feels incrementally better, because you can do that.
Thank you. Well, some things I jotted down. About 35 years ago, I took an LSD trip. And I had this incredible feeling of well-being. I knew that everything was good, everything was right, and everything would always be that way.
So something in the chemistry of that.
Well, what I want to ask you was that like a near-death or death experience? Was that connection with Source?
It was a distraction of the part of your thinking that causes the resistance that keeps you from feeling like that all the time.
So that's
why people call it high. In other words, literally it is, because that feeling of high is the releasing of the resistance and the reconnecting with who you really are.
Yeah.
But the reason that we are not really encouragers of utilizing drugs in order to achieve it is because no effort then is made in the cleaning up of your vibration, and so then you become dependent upon the drug for the sensation.
Okay, well, I don't do it anymore. All right.
Well, we still want you to achieve the high, though.
Yeah, well, I wonder if that's kind of where this is leading, where
Yes.
it's all leading back to that, or back
Yes.
to that sensation.
Yes.
Before I found your philosophy or became aware of you, I was very interested.
And by the way, before you go further, we want to respond to that by saying, you must have been somewhere in the vicinity, or you wouldn't have found us.
Well, okay, but
you see what we're getting at? In other words, can you feel that? How things lead to things, lead to things, lead to things, lead to things, lead to things. You have to be in the vibrational vicinity.
Well, but there's a contrast between where I was and where you are, if I can put it that way. I was very interested in the power of now. And I don't see how your philosophy and that philosophy mesh.
In what way?
Well, it seems to me that the power of now is very passive. It's a matter of relaxing into the moment and pretty much going with the flow.
Well, we are encouraging that too, but we know that you're going to be focusing, in other words, the most productive use of time, if you've got some active resistance within you, is to go into a state of meditation where you deactivate that thought.
Right.
And all of your power is now. So we think it is a fabulous title. But you are focusing mechanisms, and you are going to be focusing on something. And so a deliberate awareness that you have the power to choose what you focus on in your powerful now is important. You are creators, and a creator focuses, you see. And we acknowledge that we've been talking about this for some time. We called the gathering The Science of Deliberate Creation. And we loved the title of that because science indicated the ongoing evolution of it. Deliberate indicated the specifically applied deliberate focus of it. And creation, the natural response to any kind of focus. We thought it was a wonderful title. But we noticed as people began steeping themselves in the concepts of the science of deliberate creation, that they became increasingly concerned or even worried about the thoughts that they were thinking. They became monitors of thoughts. So much so that their thoughts began to worry them, and they began to criticize themselves and others about the thoughts that they were thinking. And so then we began, so now we're taking another fork, so to speak. In other words, we saw people benefiting, and then we saw them sort of turning in a way that was not as beneficial. So then we began emphasizing something that would pull them more in the direction of what they are wanting by saying to them that the stream of well-being is always flowing, that well-being will always be there for you unless you're doing something that keeps you from being a vibrational match with it, and that you are extensions of source energy, and that source is always flowing to you, and you will be the receiver of it if you are in the vibrational vicinity of that pure positive energy. And then we began talking about step 1 and step 2 and step 3, which is step 1 is the asking, step 2 is source answers, but step 3 is you've got to be in the receiving mode. So we began emphasizing the allowing part of the equation, and that's what we're hearing from you in your description of this, the power of now, is that when you are relaxing, when you're meditating, when you're soothed, when you're not pushing against something you don't want, then you're in the place of receiving what you are wanting. So then we point out that step 1, which is the asking, and step 3, which is the receiving, are 2 separate steps, and that step 1 happens automatically. Your contrasting life is going to cause you to want things. It's going to cause you to ask for things. You cannot receive answers to questions that you are not asking. So contrasting life causes you to ask. That's step 1. Maybe the book, The Power of Now, we haven't read it, and we encourage Esther not to read because we don't want her to worry about where things are coming to her from. But it sounds to us from what you are projecting here that The Power of Now may be a very good book that is emphasizing step 3, getting into the allowing mode, where you are allowing the things that you've been asking for to flow into your experience. But you cannot stop asking. The entire universe has been established to put you, genius creator, out here on the leading edge with enough contrast around you that you are going to ask. You are born to ask. You can't stop doing that, you see. But we agree with the precepts that you're offering here from The Power of Now, that the emphasis that is of the most value to most of you is bringing yourself into vibrational alignment, and that is by soothing and relaxing. Every process that we have offered, and there have been many of them, have been offered with the effort and desire that you will release resistance and allow your full connection. And we agree with what we think we've heard you say here. You should not have to work for that. It is a given. It is natural that you feel good. It is natural that you have instinct. It is natural that things go well for you. But when you look out into your population, a lot of people have sort of forked themselves into quagmires, and sometimes it takes some explanation to help them move back into the stream. And so we don't think there's any contradiction in the works. We think there is different emphasis from both works depending upon the point that is trying to be made.
To me, there's a little contradiction, and it has to do with the fact that there's an action journey and an emotion journey, but the emotion journey splits into 2 things where one is an action journey, which means...
Where are you getting that?
Well, it seems to me that if you have work to do, you say that a lot, and it's a matter of choosing the right fork. That, to me, that's an action journey.
Well, we agree with you in this sense. You can't just all of a sudden stop everything you're doing and disassociate from all of your relationships with people and with work and just all of a sudden say, everyone clear out, I'm just going to focus and think for a while, because there is a momentum to your life experience. And we are not suggesting that. What we are suggesting is that you stand where you are and that you make the best of where you are from where you are in any moment in time. And as you do that, where you are is going to get a little better. In other words, that really is the way we would approach life if we were in your physical bodies.
Okay.
And so the reason that we talk about the emotional journey is because we want you to realize that while you're standing here in this situation where you feel obliged to take this action, you can take that action with this emotion or with this emotion. And as you're taking the action with this emotion, the action is compounding something that's not working very well for you. As you're taking the action with this emotion, now the action is compounded, or the emotion and the action are working together towards something that will be more beneficial to you. You can't for very long just cease to act, and you certainly can't for very long cease to think. So you're always offering a vibration. We just want you to guide it a little more specifically. So that's why we say, as you think and feel. So you notice the correlation between the way that thought has caused you to feel. And then you think and feel. And then you think and feel. Before long, you can't tell that you're not feeling and then thinking. In other words, at first, I've gone this way, maybe down the path that doesn't feel so good. So now I really make an effort to think in order to feel better. And I do.
Right.
And so now I really make an effort to think and feel better, and I do. And now I really make an effort to think and feel better, and now I do. But eventually, you feel so good that the way you feel influences the next thought. So at first it's think and then feel, and then think and then feel, and then think and then feel, and then think and then feel. But before you know it, you can't tell that you're not feeling and then thinking and feeling and then thinking and feeling and then thinking. Haven't you shown that to yourself? Haven't you ever been on a holiday of some kind with people you love and you just feel so good that you've just got these wonderful shock absorbers and nothing's bothering you? And you're just feeling so good that it just gets better and better and better and better and better? Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, isn't that the art of allowing? Isn't that kind of the momentum? We talked about momentum a moment ago. Yeah.
Momentum is a natural. And so when you realize that, but here's the thing that we're talking about here today. Momentum is natural. And so it's more likely that I'm going to, for now, keep going in the direction of my momentum. But I can alter the direction of my momentum at any time. So let's say I got some negative momentum. Let's say I went to Marathon Coach and I had cleared out a spot of 16 days where they could work on it. And I left them a list, and I told them when I would be back. And so I went off and at some inconvenience lived in hotel rooms and carried things in the back of the car so that they could have the coach, so that they could complete the list. And then when I get back on the 16th day, I can't find my coach because they've left it locked inside the building. So then I go to find a hotel, but there aren't any because I haven't planned ahead, because I planned on sleeping in the coach. And so now I'm responding to what is. And now I'm feeling not very cared for, like they don't really care about me, that they didn't take the time to listen, that I'm not very important to them. The momentum now a momentum like that can take you back to things that were activated within you years ago, maybe even to other coach manufacturers, or in other words, and so now I've got this momentum going, and it doesn't feel very good, but it's actually easier to go that way because everything that I'm seeing is about that. I can't get a hotel room, I can't get the things out of my coach that I need, I'm going to have to wait for the weekend. It's easier to go with the momentum, you see. But then Esther said, you might be recognizing this as a real live story. Then Esther said, I'll bet that they shined that coach so beautifully and cleaned every window in it, and it's so ready for us that they left it inside so it wouldn't be dusty. So she began to turn this way a little bit. Well, when they got there, they had not worked on the coach at all. They had just barely taken it in. And so the 16 days felt like they had been for nothing, and now everything has to happen in a very short period of time. So again, Esther had the choice. She could have reached for better feeling thoughts, but she just didn't feel like it. In other words, it felt better to blame them for the wrongdoing. You see what we're getting at? You're right. The momentum of what's happening. We said this earlier today, that most people offer most of their vibration in response to what they're observing.